if you're looking for fabric and you're looking on your own, some tips to be able to find the right fabric, because it is one of the most challenging parts of getting a clothing line started. All right, so we'll get started. So today we're going to focus on giving you tips on working with fabric vendors. So the best way to meet fabric vendors is to go to a fabric trade show. That is the best way because they aren't always on the web. They're not always online. They're a little bit hard to find. And so going to different fabric trade shows, and there are quite a few, and they don't all go to all of them. So, but that is some of the best ways to meet fabric vendors. And then they're going to expect you to have a level of understanding of the industry. So you're going to find if you're armed with some basic vocabulary and you're armed with some basic questions that I'm going to teach you today, they are going to take you more seriously. So what you can expect to learn today, tips for sourcing the right fabric and trims, tips for getting that fabric vendor to take you seriously, 6 basic questions to ask fabric vendors, 5 characteristics of fabrics that you should know, and 3 ways that we can help you source the right fabric, and then some vocabulary. So we've got a bunch packed in today. It usually takes around 30 minutes or so, 20 to 30 minutes. So hopefully you're taking notes because it moves kind of fast. Okay, so we have, at Clothier Design Source, we have a 4-step process that we work with our clients through. Again, we make all of the clothing here in our building. We have the development people here, the factory here, and these are the 4 steps that we walk through. We walk through design, then prototyping, tech design, and then we manufacture. The fabric sourcing portion of it is right in step 1 design. So right here where it says sourcing. So sourcing is a huge part of you making sure you have a quality product, is finding the right fabric and the right trims. So somebody's asking, will this info be on our site? We do have a pre-recorded version of this webinar on our YouTube channel. So you can find most of this info there, but today's webinar probably will not be live on our site. So, but if you want to look at our YouTube channel and type in fabric webinar, you should be able to find most of the same information. Okay. So first of all, it's best to communicate what kind of fabric you're looking for with swatches from garments you already own. So if you've ever walked into a Joann Fabrics or a fabric store, you probably have noticed that they don't carry the fabric that you want. They don't carry apparel fabrics. So the best way to communicate what you like is from a garment. So a good investment is buying garments with similar properties to what you're looking for and cut it up. So don't be afraid to cut up your garment. Cutting around a 10 by 10 inch swatch or 8 by 8 inch swatch, and then you have something to show to fabric vendors, like this is what I'm looking for. That is actually the best way, that's the shortcut to getting fabric that you like. So, or if you're like, this fabric is really close to what I want, but I want it heavier, I want it lighter, or I want it softer, or something like that. But if you have a starting point, it's really great because you might not know all the technical features that you're looking for, but if you have something in your hand, again, that's a big shortcut to getting that fabric vendor to understand what you want. Another thing is, remember that fabric vendors are here to sell you their fabric. they don't have time to educate their customers. So preparation is key. So they are, frankly, most fabric vendors don't have a lot of patience or time to build an education for you. They want you to come to them and already understand the industry, and you already know what you're looking for, and then they just go find it and they show it to you. And if they think it's going to take a lot more time than that, if they think they're going to have to, educate you on what you're looking for and educate you on the industry and how it works, you're going to find that they're not going to be that responsive and they might not be as helpful. So again, just remember, their job is to sell you fabric. They don't see their job as to educate you on the industry. So hopefully today's webinar will help you with that. All right. So 6 questions to ask a vendor and sound smart. So number 1 is price per yard or meter. So you want to, when you see a fabric you like, you want to ask them, how much is it? How much is it per yard? The second question is availability. Is it available now, or will it be made to order? The third question are minimum order quantity. So that's also known as MOQ in the industry. So you want to, a really good way to sound smart is, what are your MOQs? You want to ask what the timelines for receiving the fabric are. So after the order is placed, how long until you receive it? Country of origin, like where was the fabric made? That's going to be important for you to know for your label. And then if sustainability is important to you, are there any sustainable features such as are it recycled, biodegradable, organic, things like that. Okay, so now I'm about to launch into the 5 characteristics of fabric. So most people that come to us looking for fabric, let's say you're looking for a certain fabric and it's for maybe this workout top that you have, and you just it's your favorite workout top and you love this fabric, and you go and look in the label and you see it's 97% cotton and 3% spandex. So then you come to us and you say, I'm looking for this 97% cotton and 3% spandex fabric. And we say, oh my goodness, that could be anything. There's so much more missing information. So the point I'm trying to make is your label in your garment just has a little tiny bit of the information needed to understand what fabric you're looking for. So content is important, but as I state here, it's only about 15% of the information that's needed to find you the right fabric. So it is important. It is the number 1 important thing, but we're going to go through additional items that are important. So the second thing that's most important is, if you say I want 97% cotton and 3% spandex, our next question is it a knit or a woven? So that's really important to know. I would say those are the 2 most important things to know: the content and if it's a knit or a woven. So if you're not from the industry, you might not know the difference. So in most cases, a knit fabric is really stretchy, or maybe not even really stretchy, it's just stretches, right? And then wovens in most cases are not stretchy. So if you, actually the shirt I have on today, it's just a button-up shirt. So if I tug on it, it's taut. It's just, it has a little tiny bit of give, but it's taut. So that's a woven. And then if you can imagine like a Under Armour t-shirt, or maybe a pair of underwear, or like yoga leggings, like those are stretchy, or maybe a t-shirt that's stretchy, so those are knits. So it's really, really important that you know the difference of what you're looking for. So this is just some diagrams of how, like the basic difference between a knit and a woven. So woven, again, not stretchy. The fibers or the yarns that get woven together in, kind of a classic, like a basket weave, kind of how you're used to thinking. And then knit the fibers get looped together, which allows it to stretch. And one of the main reasons it's important for you to understand if you're looking for a knit or a woven is the fabric vendors that you work with and the fabric vendors that you're looking for. They're either going to be in the knit world or the woven world, and very rarely does the same company do both. So usually a company will specialize in wovens or it's going to specialize in knits. So that's why it's really important you know what you're looking for, so you're going to the right company and you're asking the right people for the right fabric. All right, so the third characteristic is determining what type of knit or weave it is. So now you know, let's say now you know you're looking for a knit fabric. Now there's thousands of different kinds of knit fabrics that are really going to change the look and feel of the fabric. So I've got two examples down here. We've got the rib knit, which you can see has ribs in it, and then jersey knit, which is quite a bit more flat. So those are just two examples of different knits. Like I said, there's thousands of different kinds, but it really does make a difference once you know what kind of knit you're looking for. It makes a big difference on the look and feel. And the same thing with the weaves. There's thousands of different kinds of weaves. So that's the next thing that you're going to need to know. If you don't know what that is, that's okay, but you could start, paying attention when you're showing the fabric vendor. Maybe they'll say, oh, so you're looking for a rib knit, and then you get educated right there on the spot that you're looking for a rib knit. The next thing that we look for when we're looking for fabric for you is determining what the weight of the fabric is. This is very important. And one of the top things, if you want to get a vendor to take you seriously, this is one of the top things they're going to ask is, what weight of fabric are you looking for? So weight is usually described in grams per meter squared or ounces per linear yard, which I have written down here. And really you just have to understand the heavier the fabric, the more opaque, the more beefy it is, the more warmth it has, the more coverage it has. And then the lighter the weight, the more cool climate, maybe more casual, maybe undergarments, maybe even see-through, maybe sheer. So the more density and weight, heavier, obviously, and then the more see-through or light or flowy, the lighter the fabric is. So, and if you can somehow get to know what the weight you're looking for is, that's great. We do have lab equipment here at Clothier Design Source to punch fabric and actually get the exact weight. So, let's say you sent us a fabric of a swatch of a garment that you loved. We can take our lab equipment and punch, it's called punch out some fabric and get an exact weight. So we can be working with our mills, our fabric mills, and tell them exactly the weight we want. So just understand that weight is a huge part of what kind of fabric you're looking for. All right, the next item is this the last one? Yeah. So then the last item is the gauge of the fiber. So when we're looking for a fabric and you show us a fabric that you like, one of the things we're paying attention to is what is the gauge of the yarns that go into that fabric. Smaller gauge fibers, I put here some pretty big exaggerations in the pictures. So smaller gauge yarns are, if you can imagine what this feels like, this is a linen fabric. Linen is, kind of flowy and, like if the wind blows, it's kind of drapey. And then if you have a larger gauge yarn, if you can imagine this picture on the right, that can be really stiff and boardy, if you kind of can imagine like a gunny sack maybe. That's what an extreme example of what small fibers and large fibers do. The smaller you get, the more supple the fabric is. The larger the fibers you get, kind of the more boardy or stiff they get. So that's one reason it's very important. Just about a little bit about us. So we have a fabric sourcing department here that is just dedicating to helping people find fabrics. We work with 250 vendors worldwide, and we have over 2,000 fabric swatches in our library. So we can find, technical fabrics, fabrics with all sorts of features such as bonding and breathability and antimicrobial and UV protectant and just, kind of sky's the limit. So if you do find you're having trouble working with fabric vendors on your own, just give us a shout out. You can email us at info@Clothier Design Source, and we should be able to help you. So in the fabric world, I keep calling them vendors, so anyone who sells fabric, generally directly from the fabric mill. There's 3 kinds of fabric vendors. So we have categorized them into 3 different categories. This is not industry-wide terms, but just for you when you're searching out fabric vendors, for you to understand, there are 3 different kinds of fabric vendors. So we call them tier 1 or stock fabric vendors. So these are the kind of fabric vendors that are a little bit more like a retail setting, a little bit. So they weave or knit their fabric. They have different fabric rolls sitting on a shelf. You call them up and you say, hey, Joe, I'd like 10 yards of fabric. And no problem. They pull the roll off the shelf, they cut off 10 yards, and they mail it to you. So that's tier 1. So that's really great because the minimum order quantity is very low. You aren't required to order thousands of yards. So that's one really great advantage. The one disadvantage is you can't, there isn't as big a selection of fabric. So you're really limited to the few companies out there that are willing to make fabric, have it sitting on a shelf, and wait for you to come and order it. So that's one kind of fabric vendor. To recap, their minimums are really low, which is wonderful, but the availability and the variety of fabric is pretty limited. So then there's tier 2 fabric vendors. And so these fabric vendors are waiting for somebody to call them up and order fabric, and then they'll set up their fabric knitting equipment and they will knit the fabric to order. So it's not sitting on a shelf. And so the minimum order quantities start to get a lot larger. Generally around 1,000 yards is what they require to sell you fabric. This is probably the most common type of fabric vendor. And the advantage is you can get a ton of different kinds of fabric. I mean, almost anything you can think of or anything you've seen out there in the industry, you're able to get in tier 2. Obviously, the disadvantage is it has a larger minimum ordered quantity because in order to set up their equipment and knit you or weave you the fabric, they have a minimum quantity requirement. Then there's tier 3 fabric vendors, which, this is like the sky's the limit. You can do anything you could possibly imagine with fabric. And this is where, and we do this for a lot of clients where we will go and develop fabric. So it's something that has never existed. You're actually not going to find it in your closet or at a store or in your, in a garment. This is something that maybe you dreamed up or we dream up with you. And then we go and have a fabric mill actually develop it and create it custom for you. So, for instance, we had a client come to us who had infant clothing and they wanted the clothing to soften the baby's skin as it's being worn. So we were able to infuse some aloe and shea butter into the fabric by working with some fabric mills and infusing it into the fiber and then knitting the fabric. And so now our client has this proprietary fabric that will soften your skin as being worn and last through several washes. So that's just an example of what Tier 3 is, just kind of, if you can dream it up, it probably is possible. All right, so now we're going to talk about some vocabulary. So just some common things that I've seen in the industry that if you're new to the industry, some things that you might have a little mix up if you're talking to vendors. So the number one word that is confusing people not in the industry is the word pattern. So most people, when they're talking about pattern, they're talking about on this right side, they're talking about a garment pattern, which is like the shapes of the garments that get cut out of the fabric, so that those shapes, that engineered like digital file is called the pattern. Okay. Textile pattern. So if you are talking about a pattern on your fabric, I would just preface it with the word textile pattern to make sure you're communicating clearly that you're not talking about a garment pattern. So that's one thing. Another way to really talk about pattern is using the word print. So if you look on the left here, there's a stack of fabrics that have been printed. That would be a much more common term to use than calling it a pattern. So this is actually fabric that started white and then through a process was printed to get this, the various different colors and textures on the surface. There's another way to get colors and textures in your fabric, which is called yarn dye. And that is when the fibers, so let's talk about this top fabric here. This fabric started with white fibers and dark purple and light pink fibers. And then those fibers got woven together, which created this different color stripe. So you can get these patterns by either dyeing the fibers and weaving or knitting them together, or by having white fabric and then printing the surface to get the different patterns. Now we're going to talk about how you get solid color fabric, which is more common than print or pattern. So there's 3 different ways to get solid color fabric. And if you kind of understand these different ways, it is going to help you work with a fabric vendor much better. So piece dye fabric, so that's fabric that, when they set up the knitting equipment or weaving equipment and they weave 1,000 or let's say 3,000 yards of white fabric, then they take that white fabric and they go take 1,000 and dye it yellow and another 1,000 and dye it red and another 1,000 and dye it blue. So that's called piece dye when it's dyed at that fabric level. Then there's yarn dye, which is similar to making like a plaid, but you can just dye all of the yarns blue, for instance, and then weave them together and have a solid blue fabric. And then the third way is like these t-shirts here, for instance, were made out of white fabric. They got cut and sewn and they're, say you got thousands of white t-shirts, and then you take those actual t-shirts and split them up and dye them into different colors. That's called garment dye. So we can help if you're looking, if you're looking for fabric. If you're here, you're probably interested in how to find the right fabric. So if you do need any help with it, we do offer free 15-minute consultations. Just contact us at this information below. You can contact us via email or phone. Check out our website, and we can help you. Again, have us source your fabrics. This is Selvia, part of our sourcing team. This is Tiny, our office dog. looking for fabrics. And then also just one other quick thing, I do teach a webinar, or not a webinar, an all-day academy event for people that are new to the industry. We just had one this weekend. We're definitely having one coming up in November, and maybe one sooner, but for sure in November, where I do like a I think it's like a 7-hour day. We do 6 classes, we do a bunch of networking, we do a tour of our factory, but we really work on helping people new to the apparel industry launch their lines and make sure they're like launching in the correct order and not making any mistakes or wasting a bunch of money. So a little plug for our Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We're very active on all 3 of those channels. Lots of Facebook or lots of YouTube videos out there of me. I've got hours and hours of me and some of my staff that work here, talking about just various things in the industry, how to avoid mistakes, how to tackle your clothing line as best as possible. What company do you recommend to produce your own design? If you mean by garment design, well, I recommend us, of course. I recommend us to produce your own print design, to produce your own garment design. We help, that's what we do, is help people do that. I'm the owner of the company. We've got around 40 people on staff here, just like dedicated to making other brands' apparel. So I would recommend us.
I hope you're learning something. We're doing these videos to help apparel entrepreneurs succeed. I'm hoping these are helpful to you. If they are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel, click the bell icon so you get notifications when we add more content.